find out. Well, my name is Jen Pettis. I'm the Director of Strategic Alliances at GSA, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. And we have a few housekeeping things to go through to get us started. We will use the Q&A function throughout the program, so please comment or ask your questions there. I'll be asking our presenters the questions at the end of the program, and we'll attempt to answer all the questions, but we'll provide any answers that we can't get through via email following the program. Our program is being recorded today and will be archived on the GSA website. It will be available on demand along with the resources discussed in today's program. You'll receive an email with the resources after the program, and you can also access them at geron.org/AIHE, and you can scan this QR code and it will take you right there to the materials as well. We ask that you keep your video off and your audio on mute during the webinar. There will be a brief survey immediately following the webinar that will pop right up on your screen. Please do participate in that for our research team. They value your input. Now let me introduce Nina Silverstein and ask her to introduce herself, provide an overview of our program, and introduce our other panelists. Take it away, Nina.
Thank you, Jen. Hello, and welcome to the first of 2 webinars we are presenting on increasing age inclusivity in higher education. In this first webinar, we will be focusing on the technical aspects of administering and analyzing data generated through the Age-Friendly Inventory and Campus Climate Survey, the ICCS. We will also share a companion resource manual for you to use as a reference, plus all the analytic files you will need. Our presenters are all members of a research team that has been collaborating on age inclusivity efforts since 2018. I am Nina Silverstein, and I'm joined by colleagues Susan Krauss Whitbourne and Lauren Marshall Bowen from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and Joanne Montapar from LaSalle University. Our work is made possible through a grant from the RRF Foundation on Aging. We thank the Gerontological Society of America and its Academy for Gerontology in Higher Education for hosting this webinar. We also thank our partners, the American Council on Education and the Age-Friendly University Global Network, for their help in promoting this webinar. Now we're ready to have Joanne start us off.
Thank you, Nina. So briefly, the plan for today's webinar is to first begin with some comments about the need and the value of creating more age-inclusive campuses and about 2 initiatives that are guiding this mission. Then you're going to hear about the design of the Age-Friendly Inventory and Campus Climate Survey, which we fondly call the ICCS, and how to use it to assess your institution's age-friendly assets, as well as gaps and opportunities. And then we'll have time to respond to your questions. So let's start with the question, why should higher education even aim to be more age inclusive? Educators in the aging field, and many of you here today, have made great strides in developing and implementing programs and practices across our campuses that address aging issues. However, we all recognize that there are many ways in which the need to be more age inclusive is becoming even more evident in higher education. This is especially true as our social structures are undergoing dramatic shifts, as our populations are not only becoming older, but more age inclusive than ever. So in particular, we're seeing an increase in adults' interest in lifelong learning and higher education to extend their professional development as they experience longer work lives and to enhance their personal well-being as they age. We're also seeing the need to extend education about aging literacy to all of our students as they enter the workforce that's not only more age diverse, but also in need of practitioners with knowledge about age-related issues. Faculty and staff in higher education are also more age diverse than ever. They're aging in place across our campuses. We're aging in place across our campuses. And this contemporary workplace is calling for our institutions to consider how they can better support faculty and staff, both professionally and personally, across their long careers. Along with providing educational opportunities, our institutions also play an important role in advancing knowledge around aging through its research, which is always in need of being expanded in innovative and new ways. And we also know that more education and research about aging can help dismantle age stereotypes, age biases, and discrimination, which continue to be pervasive in our society. And we've seen much evidence of that over the last few years. And last, but certainly not least to consider, is that the call to be more age-friendly is being heard across other environments, including our cities, our states, our health systems, and our businesses. This is creating what's being called the age-friendly ecosystem, with exciting efforts underway locally, nationally, and globally around aging. So to advance age-friendly practices and programs in higher education that speak to the call I've just described, two pioneering approaches have emerged. These approaches are the Age-Friendly University AFU Global Network Initiative and the Age Inclusivity Domains of Higher Education AIDHE Initiative. The AFU initiative was launched by Dublin City University in collaboration with Arizona State University and the University of Strathclyde. And it offers 10 principles for how higher education can support older age-diverse populations through lifelong learning, intergenerational exchange, and aging-focused education and research. At present, the AFU Global Network consists of over 110 colleges and universities across the globe. And a good number of those institutions are affiliates of GSA and its Academy for Gerontology and Higher Education. And to extend the reach of age inclusivity in higher education, GSA and its Academy for Gerontology and Higher Education, AGI, have recently adopted the Age Inclusivity Domains of Higher Education, the AIDHE model, which our research team developed over the last few years with support from the RRF Foundation for Aging. This is the model that is also guiding the ICCS, which you're here to hear about today. The AIDHE model advocates that campus practices be viewed within the context of 7 core institutional domains across campuses. This includes teaching and learning, student affairs, outreach and engagement, personnel, physical environment, research, and services and resources. The model also extends the view of age inclusivity by taking into consideration not just the experiences of age-diverse students, but also age-diverse faculty and staff. Now, these are wonderful and inspiring initiatives, but to move them forward, what we really need are empirical tools to help our institutions assess their present age-friendly practices, as well as to identify gaps and opportunities. And the ICCS was designed to do just this. So now what I want to do is to turn to the ICCS, beginning with the theoretical model that was used in designing its components. So the ICCS is based on a social ecological model. And this model argues that environments can be evaluated with respect to core domains, such as their organizational structures, their social resources, their physical characteristics, and individuals within those environments. The model also argues that the quality of an individual's adaptation to an environment reflects not only the presence of practices and programs within the different domains, but also the degree of congruence, or what we refer to as match, between the actual or objective components and the expected or subjective domains of the environment. So how does this map onto the ICCS? The ICCS consists of 3 components. The first is the inventory component, and it uses reports by representatives from departments across a campus to identify which age-friendly practices are in place. These departments reflect the 7 core domains that I already mentioned earlier: teaching and learning, student affairs, outreach, engagement, personnel, etc. The Campus Climate Survey component uses a series of scales to assess how students, as well as faculty and staff, perceive these practices and perceive the age friendliness of their campuses. And the third component is the match component. And this is the unique social ecological aspect of the ICCS. And this assesses the match between campus practices and perceptions by students, faculty, and staff. So in short, what the match tells us is the extent to which individuals are aware of and value the age-friendly practices on their campus. Now, what you see here are the 7 core domains, again, that the ICCS assesses, along with some examples of specific practices within each domain. The inventory covers many more practices than this, but we just wanted to give you an example of what some of the practices within each domain look like. So, for example, in the domain of services and resources, the ICCS inventory would look at whether there are programs and practices in place on a campus that offer caregiving, healthcare, fitness, wellness, and technology support for older age diverse students, faculty, and staff. Okay, so now you know what the ICCS was designed to do, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan, who's going to walk you through the logistics of administering the ICCS and scoring and analyzing the data that you'll collect.
Hi, thank you, Joanne. That was really a great prelude to what we'll be covering next, which in depth, we will be getting to the heart of this webinar, beginning with what you need to get started as you think about and hopefully use the ICCS. So to begin, you need to have access to Excel, which is used for the inventory component. You need to have Qualtrics, which is the way that the climate survey is distributed. And then you need SPSS for the data analyses. So the ICCS manual that accompanies this webinar is built around the use of these specific tools. Next, you want to assemble your team and organize the logistics. So what we advise is that you assemble a research team, because it will take multiple people to do this. And then you include someone who will coordinate the data collection across the various components of the ICCS. So that will be your champion. Then that champion, or you, if you're the champion, identifies department representatives who are going to actually then go ahead and complete the inventory along with you and with their teams. The third part of the logistics is working with campus leadership to arrange to distribute the campus climate survey to students, faculty, and staff. So that will then mean that you need to get on board with who's ever going to be distributing this. So we do recommend that the invitation comes from the office of your senior leadership to help ensure the survey reaches across your campus population. You can also work locally to encourage groups to complete the survey, but we do find that it is helpful and effective to have campus leadership. And then also a side benefit, this encourages campus leaders to want to hear about your findings later on, to hear what you've learned. Okay, next, we're going to go to the next slide here, which covers the procedures involved in administering the inventory. So let me just walk you through this really briefly. First, you're going to distribute the inventory Excel file to department representatives, and it will be a workbook. You will ask them to fill the information in for their respective departments. And while they do that, they need to hide the sheets that would go to other departments. You're actually shipping this off to the different departments. And when each department gets a section, it will contain specific items with drop-down menus. And those will automatically and magically convert responses of yes, no, don't know to ones and zeros. Now, the exception is HR, because HR is actually going to be providing numbers. So their sheet is somewhat separate. So you might be wondering, well, what if the one person I asked doesn't know the answers? They can turn to others in their department to provide any information that they don't have. And so they can, many departments are multifaceted, so you take advantage of that. Somebody who doesn't know will ask somebody who does know. And then what you're going to get back are Excel sheets that should be filled in. And you might also keep a record of who is filling them in. So when they come in, there's an SPSS file that's going to correspond to each sheet of the Excel, and you're going to then fill in the responses. And I'll show you how this is done. Now, it's a wonderful system works really well. There is the fact, though, that somebody will have to do this by hand. There's really no automatic way to do Excel to SPSS conversion. But no worries, it's not that long. And when you break it apart, it doesn't really, it's not an arduous task. All right, so let's go to the next slide, which shows you what an inventory sheet might look like. And this is Center for Teaching and Learning. So you can see that there's all the different questions that would be asked, and then there will be a response that is filled in. And then that's going to automatically get a score. Now, we do suggest that people keep records of the name of the people who filled this out, just because you might want to go back and ask some questions later. All right, so let's see, that would take care of the Excel sheet. Now, this shows you what happens when things actually get scored. Remember, I said magically drop-downs change from yes to no, don't know to scores, and this is what they do. So they literally, yes turns to be 1, no is 0, don't know is actually 0 as well. Because if they don't know about it, it probably doesn't exist. So we consider them as comparable. Okay, so all of this then gets done, and you put the work back together. Before I mentioned what the SPSS file would look like, and so here is what it looks like for CTL. This stretches across, so you're going to put your campus name, which would probably be one campus. Unless you have multiple campuses, which we could answer later in the questions. But generally, it would just be one row, and it's just going to have 1s and 0s on it. That's basically going to be your SPSS file. And this, as you can see, is only showing the Center for Teaching and Learning. Okay, so now you're going to go next to the SPSS, the inventory scoring syntax. So there is a syntax file called ICCS inventory scale scoring. This will produce a scored file, which we would recommend you save with the new name, keep the other one, separate. You'll then get it scored. And what this will do, once you've done the actual scoring, you're going to see that you get a scored file, that you combine items across departments into scales for each domain. So this might seem a little confusing, but it makes sense in that you would have, as you see here, the teaching score. So that would be the score across all the subcategories of teaching, academic support, classroom support, curriculum on aging, service learning, lifelong learning. So then that gets labeled teaching and learning sum, and then it simply gets formatted. And then at the end of it all, the grand result is going to be a total inventory score. That's the inventory sum. So that's all of them: outreach, engagement, all the 7 domains that you've already heard about from Joanne. And the rest is just sort of making sure everything is properly formatted. Okay, let's turn to the next slide, which is going to take you through administering the climate survey in Qualtrics. So all this can be going on simultaneously. Of course, you don't have to do this, one step at a time. In fact, it might be more efficient if you did sort of combined steps here. But here are the parts of the survey. So it has a series of questions about age-friendly campus practices called CP. Then, and there's quite a few of those. And as you'll see, the way they're worded, it depends upon who's actually getting the item. So there's a nuance there in the wording, but all of the campus practice scales cover those 7 domains. Then there are the attitudinal questions, age friendliness, campus ratings of campus age friendliness. That's a 10-item scale. And personal beliefs about age inclusivity. And you'll be seeing examples of all these items as well, or personal beliefs. And those are people's feelings about having people of different ages in class, and in taking workshops about aging, etc. There's a section on demographics, and then importantly, open response comments, where people can say whatever they like about the age-friendly campus climate. And those can be very, very informative. Okay, next, This shows you the age friendliness scale. And you'll have this as a resource, but you get the kind of feel of this, that it's like, how comfortable do you feel on campus? Do you feel respected and welcomed? And how do older faculty feel? Next, the personal beliefs items on the next scale show how people feel about this age inclusivity, as I mentioned earlier. So these are the exact items. And then we're going to get to the actual breaking it down. I know I've already covered this, but now we have a series of steps, and the following slides will also help to elucidate what's happened in these steps. So these are really the steps that will walk you through it. So first of all, obviously, you just distribute the survey to your entire campus. Of course, everybody responds to it. We know we get 100% response rate. We wish, but you'd be surprised. People do seem to like taking the survey. Anyway, on your end, whenever the data collection is over, you're going to export that into an SPSS file, and then you're going to save that file, label it with the date. You can run multiple downloads of that. So each time you want to make sure you have the date. Then you will have the climate survey syntax. So that is going to be automatically, you're going to run that on that download. It's going to label the variables and prepare the file for the next steps. Recommend, save the file with a different name and date. If I'm repeating myself on that point, it's because you learned through hard experience. You want to make sure that you really keep the steps as separate as possible. Anyway, within the survey scoring, all items that have the same content are grouped together regardless of the wording of the item. And when you look at the syntax, you're going to see, oh, I have to change this to that, because the concept is the same, even though the wording might be different, especially for the practices. Then, because not everybody is totally honest and pays attention to every single question, you have to clean the data, and you're going to run the syntax for eliminating invalid cases, not invalid cases. This will reduce the total number of respondents, but again, save the file with a different name and date. Now you have a nice clean data set. All the invalid cases have been eliminated. Everything has been scored, the climate, demographic, and then all the missing data and all the value labels are noted. And this will produce what you're looking for, 3 sets of scores: campus practices by domain, age friendliness, and personal beliefs. Then you have now completed the scoring of the climate survey. Now you want to do the magic of the match. So the first thing you're going to do is match that survey file with the inventory file. And because there's only one row in the inventory file, you're going to perform what's called a one-to-many match. And then you will be running the match syntax, which will create match scores by domain and by constituent, and and then you'll get a total. So now let's take a look at the logic of the whole behind the operation, producing the match scores between the inventory and climate survey. So there are 67 inventory and campus practice items that make up the match score, where everything lines up between what was provided by the administrators, how people perceive the practice being present. And so you're going to get 67 of these items within each, and they cover the 7 campus domains. So the SPSS syntax had to correct for the fact that each group answers slightly different responses and slightly different numbers of questions, but it all gets done with the match survey syntax. So the match scores ultimately reflect the extent to which students, faculty, and staff are aware of existing age-friendly campus practices. So now let's look at some examples. You might be wondering, how does this actually work? So you can see there's an inventory item. The administrator checks this off, yes or no. Climate item, do people perceive this? The access to offices or other workspaces. And then these were just random examples that we picked. They're not all within CTL, but you can see some of them are exactly the same wording, and some of them had to vary according to which group was filling out their own climate survey on the campus practices. So that shows you some examples there. Next, here is the way the scoring is actually done. So if you remember back in the inventory, it was either 1, 0, 0, whether the practice was present or not. So it's either 1 or 0. And then in the climate survey, they could say yes, no, they could say don't know. And the only scores that are considered a match are yes, the practice is present, people recognize it. No, it's not present, and people recognize it's not present. Everything else is not a match because it's showing that there's a discrepancy. So even that that don't know creeps in there as not being a match. So again, all of this is laid out in the syntax, which we can take a look at. Next. And so this shows you syntax names. And you can see when you look at this later, we don't have time to like go through each one of these right now, but and it's all laid out in the manual. You can see, oh, well, faculty were saying that, students were saying that, and you can see how those then become comparable. So those are examples there. So the next we'll see what happens in the climate survey, where the syntax variable names, you see teach 1 is the same for faculty and students, and all of that gets done in the syntax. And so you see then how those two will line up, though still answering the same question, teach _1. Okay. And this is just an example of the syntax that would be done for that. I know it's not the most exciting thing to read right now, but it works so that everything gets put where it's supposed to go when this everything is run. And next, you can see how that famous match score will get calculated. Again, this is a lot of if that, then that, but it's all set so that roll 5 = 1, that's faculty, or roll 5 = 3, that's student, then you get that corresponding match. And so that's how that all comes together. So this produces then at the very end of the whole operation, you get a match score. You can get some sub-match scores if you want, but the match mean is going to be your basic match score. And that's the one that is going to give you what is the essentially percentage, but it's proportion of practices that people on the campus are aware of. This is separate from AF. It is separate from PB. This is just the match score, which is the ultimate test of that social ecological model. Now, having covered all of this, it's Lauren's turn to talk to you about how to use your findings.
All right, thanks, Susan. So while it's likely you already have some goals and objectives of your own for using these data, I'll round out the webinar by offering a few suggestions and insights for making your findings visible and impactful at your institution based on lessons we've learned from distributing findings at a multi-campus university system. So first, we recommend developing a comprehensive written report of your findings that can represent the involvement of all campus departments across the 7 domains of campus function. So in this way, you'll have a complete record of findings to share with colleagues who are interested in advancing age inclusivity on campus and to revisit with future assessments. This kind of reporting also reinforces the idea that age inclusivity is the responsibility of all members of the campus community. Second, because like us, our colleagues and administrators are busy and attention is limited, we recommend creating an easy-to-read executive summary of your key findings. This might include infographics with demographic data, such as how age diverse is our campus, as well as key findings across and/or within domains to distribute to administrators, department representatives, including those who completed the inventory, faculty, and interested others. We also strongly recommend at-a-glance summaries to highlight aspects of what you learned about age-friendly practices within each domain. So these visual summaries can be added to a one-page executive summary at the beginning of your written report. So just some quick suggestions for findings to highlight in these summaries. Age diversity of students, faculty, and staff from the demographics portion of the inventory. Overall awareness of the university's age-friendly university status from your Qualtrics results. So that would be AFUA items 1, 2, and 3. And inventory scores represented as a % of campus practices reported as being in place in each domain. and awareness of overall age-friendly campus practices shown by match scores. So these are just a few suggested highlights based on our syntax, but you'll have a rich data set from the ICCS that will allow you to conduct additional analyses to explore and highlight areas of most interest to you. And finally, don't let your work be a one-and-done experience. We recommend recruiting extended participation by organizing presentations of study highlights for faculty in specific committees, departments, or other program units. You may want to share insights at professional conferences and join the community of scholars working toward increasing age inclusivity in higher education, as so many of you on this call are already doing. Further, because we've found that involving key stakeholders in discussions can educate community members on the importance of age inclusivity while also making impactful change, we recommend organizing discussion groups with key campus leaders and community members to review your findings and together develop a strategic plan to improve age inclusivity measures on your campus. In advance of such a meeting, provide attendees with information about your findings, and we have some suggested questions to guide these discussions in the manual that accompanies this webinar. So in general, consider a multifaceted strategy for communicating your findings to the campus community and recruiting their participation in further efforts. Above all, once you've set benchmarks following this first ICCS assessment and have developed your strategic plan with campus partners, make plans for follow-up assessment. And with that final important suggestion, I'll pass it back to Nina.
Thank you, Lauren. Before we get to your questions, we do have a few announcements. We look forward to having you join us Friday, September 27th, when we present evidence-based strategies for campus practices in several high-impact, high-need domains that have emerged from our research. We hope that you will invite campus leadership and colleagues who can most impact your campus policy decisions to join you for that September webinar. For more information about efforts to increase age inclusivity in higher education, we encourage you to explore resources available through the Gerontological Society of America's dedicated webpage using the QR code displayed, and also to visit the Age-Friendly University Global Network website, and you have that QR code for them as well. And we direct you to our recent publications based on our age inclusivity research. An article based on the tools we just shared with you today was published in the journal Research in Higher Education. And the research we'll share with you in September was just published in the Journal of Diversity in Higher Education. Those participating in this live webinar will receive a follow-up message from GSA with these resources. Colleagues watching the webinar on demand should also be able to access the resources on the GSA website. Now we're ready for your questions and comments. Jen has been monitoring the Q&A for us, but please use this time to enter any additional thoughts. And of course, you can always follow up with us at our project email, umass.afustuddy@umb.edu. And now we'll stop sharing screen. And Jen?
So much, ladies. That was a great program. So I want to start with asking a question about who how folks can get help. And the question is, if we have questions with pulling this all together, administering the ICCS and doing the analyses, how can they get a hold of someone for help?
Okay, thank you, Jen. Let me first try to respond to that. We are sharing a lot of files with you today. We are sharing the analytic files that for our SPSS and Qualtrics. We are sharing a manual, step-by-step manual. We put a lot into this. We hope that it's that you'll be able to review the PowerPoint as well. Clearly, though, you could certainly email our project email and with any questions, and we'll certainly try to best guide you. And we welcome those questions as well.
Great. Okay, the next question I have is, how long would you estimate the entire process takes, including administering the ICCS and completing the data? And I wonder if you can give insight when answering this question about the size of the team and when you're talking about the length of time with that.
Lauren, I'm going to ask you to respond, please.
Sure. So as Susan pointed out in her portion of the webinar, a lot of these elements can happen simultaneously. You can have the survey running while you're collecting inventory data. For us, we conducted this over the period of 2 semesters, but I think the key thing to keep in mind is timing. So the release of the survey, you don't want that to go out, at the very end of a semester or during the really busy early days of the semester. So you want to be thoughtful about the timing as well. In terms of the size of the team, as Susan pointed out, it's good to have somebody who's sort of coordinating the inventory data collection, somebody who is specializing in the SPSS analysis. So it really depends on who you've got to work with on your campus, but as we've found, having a larger team does help move things along and make things a little more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, part of the time we took was making sure everything was working and getting it all to run smoothly and refining the Qualtrics and refining the inventory for that matter. But the actual administration of the inventory went pretty quickly on the campus that I organized, which was my former campus, UMass Amherst. And, you kind of tap on people's shoulders, say, you need to get this done by the end of the week. All of the questions on the inventory are short, except for one unit, the provost office. That's a little bit longer, but then that also gets shipped out to other people who help. So you only want to give them like 2 or 3 weeks and they can get the inventory done. And then like Lauren said, for the survey, you want to give them, maybe a month or something at first and second time.
And I'll also add the role of graduate research assistants. In the first year, when we did not have any funding, internal or external, I offered an independent study to a graduate student, and that really helped us, get kick-started. And then also the extent to which, actually, one of the neatest things, Lauren is a professor of English on our campus. We met her through this, through putting through another colleague who knew we were doing this. So, finding people across your campus who are who understand the value of this kind of thing. So we were not. I'm quite proud that we were not all just coming from gerontology.
Wonderful. I want to answer the next couple questions, and that is, will this webinar be available as a recording? It definitely will. I mentioned that we'll send out an email shortly that will give everyone the links to the main page of the Age Inclusivity in Higher Education in GSA Enrich, which is geron.org/AIHE. And from there, you can get to the ICCS page, but we will also give you direct links that will be PDF downloads of the manual, of the other resources. And this webinar will be made available on that slide. It will also be, we will make a PDF of the PowerPoint of the slides, if that's okay with our panel, and make that available there as well. How do you handle missing data within the scales?
Oh, good question. Really what we do is essentially impute it, because all the scores are means, averages. There's nothing that's a total. So yeah, there was, and if there's too much missing data, well, they get eliminated in the invalid case syntax. But yeah, they have to be, they're just computed automatically.
Susan, I might, why don't you also add our experience with straight lining?
Well, sure. Okay, that's the other way to be an invalid responder. You could just give don't knows all the way through or yeses all the way through. And while it's lovely if a campus has a bunch of yeses, we all know that might be a little bit inattentive of a responder. Well, you don't know, but you assume. And there's so much data now about, so many studies now about Qualtrics and the joys and the sorrows, and that's one of the sorrows, but there are ways to fix it. I think our criterion was approximately variance less than 0.21, because I calculated that seemed like the good breaking point.
I just want to, reinforce for people, you will have the syntax files that will do this for you.
Yeah.
Thanks to Susan, who's prepared all of those syntax files. So you just have to run the syntax file and it will take care of cleaning the data for you.
Someone asked, do most universities publish findings in scholarly literature? I think maybe they need survey findings. I'm not sure.
I mean, I've seen campuses put on their website climate survey results. I mean, I think that's pretty frequent, and that's where Lauren was saying it's really good to get the attention of the higher administrators. Well, not if it's a number like, well, you can still dial this up in a way that will not make that number look so bad if it's low. But one of the nice things about the inventory is it actually gives you a score on how the campus is doing in these 7 domains. And a lot of them, the scores are really high. And so you can flaunt that, you know, as a positive attribute.
I think it certainly depends on the intent. In our earlier study where we looked at 23 campuses across the nation, one of the things we did for them was to give them confidential reports that they could use for their own planning and strategic plans. So I don't know. I think it's a good question, but our intent initially was not about publishing, although we have a lot to say, and it's evidenced by the number of publications that we do have already. But I do think, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I'd like to be able to talk to that individual more about asking it. Lauren, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say some folks have talked about their campus results at conference presentations at GSA and elsewhere, but yeah, I think that this is an interesting thought that we were more interested in creating reports that would spur action on campus as opposed to sort of scholarship, but certainly there's rich data that the ICCS generates that could lead to scholarly analysis.
Yeah. And I think Joanne had a comment too.
I was going to say exactly that. I know people have been presenting, you know, their findings and insights and recommendations. So kind of like case studies. So I know there have been a number of symposia at GSA and proposals for symposia. So those are great ways to take this kind of information about your institution, not only to move it into scholarship, but also to move it to be informative for other institutions and how we're all kind of collectively working to advance age inclusivity. It might also make for a good, if you have an idea, it might make for a good article for the Age Inclusivity in Higher Education newsletter that I edit. So if you have an idea relevant to what you found in your campus findings, then drop me a note.
The other, and just to add more to that, so if you look at the 2 articles we're just publishing now, they are not in gerontology publications, they're in higher ed. And so we've stealthily, I don't know if I can say that in this webinar, been getting the word out about age inclusivity to higher ed. I mean, higher ed needs to hear this. So we are really thrilled if people want to publish using the ICCS in whatever format. You have an article that shows methodologically that it's sound, and then also what the findings were, but let's go spread the word to not just the choir, but the people in the audience of the choir.
Great. This next is more of a comment than a question. I would just add that this would be a wonderful tool to use as part of your, it says AGEGN, but I'm thinking it may be AFUGN, global, renewal requirement in year 5 of your designation.
In fact, you know, among those campuses that we did give individual reports to, they did, and we ourselves used it, you know, to submit as well.
Okay, great. Someone asked if you have a template for an IRB protocol that they could use.
Yes, Lauren, it's at the beginning of the Qualtrics. Is it still there, or did we take it out?
We do not have a template in the Qualtrics for the consent form, if that's what you mean. But yeah, this is a really great question. And Nina, you had written our IRB process. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it was interesting depending upon the campuses. Some of the champions that participated with us needed to go through their own IRB. Others were able to use our approval as exempt status to use our IRB and to get that approved on their campus. Good question. I think it varies by campus, but that would certainly be a follow-up that if that individual contacts us, we can share what we did.
Yeah, I mean, it's an anonymous survey, and then the inventory doesn't require IRB approval because people are not individually, I mean, they're doing that as part of their administrative jobs.
This is an interesting question, and it asks if the toolkit includes making the case to leadership. And so I wondered if you could speak to the toolkit, but then in general, how you all made that case.
Well, the introduction to the manual does talk about that. And certainly our publications, introductions to all of our publications include great case examples or great information about how to make the case. But I think a couple of things to keep in mind when you're thinking about making the case is, remember, keep the lens of this being a campus-wide initiative. It's not just about a particular program in aging or gerontology. It's about a campus-wide initiative. So, several times we've mentioned having a team. And so the first thing you do want to be able to do in making your case is get together, colleagues from across the institution. So now I'm in psychology, but not just in psychology, but in sociology and biology. I mean, many people who have worked in this area said one of the exciting things about kind of bringing people together is you realize what people are doing across campus that you may not have been aware of. It's also important to reach out to offices like career services and your DEI offices, if you have an office of community engagement. So starting to make the case by bringing together what is already happening on your campus and how, together we can be stronger if we do this. Another thing that you may want to do, which you could work with your HR to do, is to show how age diverse your campus is. We've been saying we have to change the narrative that higher education is age segregated. Yeah, there are lots of undergraduates who are between the ages of 18 and 25, but there are a lot of other individuals on our campuses, and HR can give you information to show how age diverse your campus is, not just with respect to students, including graduate students, but also faculty and staff. And so that's important information to start making the case as well.
Yeah,
so I think that's the things to keep in mind. Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's also something concrete. Universities are rated internationally now on sustainability according to the SDGs. And so they get a ranking and they want that ranking to be high. So attending to age inclusivity by participating in activities like this helps them to be able to check that box.
And in fact, that question about, do universities even know how age diverse their campus is? Until the question is asked, I can recall, institutional research only looking at 30 plus, or just really not asking the question really kind of elicits the response that brings awareness. And we also found in our early days of, particularly with the inventory, of having, opening the conversation. People had not really thought about these before. And I will say that these items really were generated through focus groups that we conducted with an intergenerational group of both people from faculty, staff, and students, early on when we were looking at this. So these items of about close to 1,000 practices really were generated there.
Joanne, you were talking some about working with HR and getting leadership involved. Do you have any other tips about how administration how you can get them to help with getting the survey out and all of that? Any other tips that you didn't mention yet?
Well, again, I think taking this community with this campus-wide lens so that, if you go to an administrator and, you're not making the argument that it's just for my independent program, but this is going to be of benefit for a number of programs and how we work collectively. It's going to be important for our students with respect to, workforce development, working in an age diverse workforce environment. I think my experience with some administrators is that's just not where their head has been. But when you present the case, they're like, wow, hadn't thought about that. There is a great GSA publication that we did several years ago, a What's Hot publication. That's a very kind of easy read as well. That could be something that you could send to them about making the case for age inclusivity. Again, maybe sending them one of our articles. You don't want to send them a whole reading list, but that might be useful. But I think, again, getting people together beforehand to work out the case that will work best for your institution, I think makes good sense.
No, but I wasn't kidding. I mean, hopefully they're going to read the article in some of these higher ed journals and say, oh, we should do that here. I mean, wouldn't it be great if the idea came from them and not
Right.
you? And I think there too, the champion's role is so important, because that having connections like that and not being afraid to schedule a meeting to discuss this, and here's this great initiative, why don't we get on board? And then there's the peer aspect of it too, their peers. If there are consortiums in your area or you're part of a larger system, you can try to use that to sort of get them going on, because administrators want to know what other administrators are doing. So if you can show them success in other campuses, especially their peer institutions, they will pay attention.
Yeah. Could I ask how many participants in this webinar have actually utilized the ICCS tool on their own campus already? And if
We
you could
can
turn
ask
your
folks to
camera
raise
on.
their hand.
Hmm?
We can ask people to raise their hand.
Yeah, raise your hand.
That have done that.
I don't know. I saw.
We
I
have
don't
a
know.
fresh crop. Well,
No.
that's good. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things I know, we've talked to some people here, but we were really waiting to get that final publication in, or those. Oh, Katerina, there you are. Hi. We've worked with, it was actually really helpful to work with you and see how do we communicate best. And I think the people that we have partnered with said, oh, could you include this? So, Katerina, if you want to say anything.
I think it's been a really exciting experience for us. We received a little bit of internal funding. We have an Excellence in Education initiative within our college. And so we've been able to use that. I think meeting with you just made it so we were like, okay, we can do this. So at our college, we just started with a pilot. We administered the AFU inventory portion across the entire campus because we needed that. And then the ICCS, the Campus Climate Survey, we did in our college. And so the ICCS is full. We're waiting for one last inventory. The provost one is pretty intense. And so they've been really lovely to work with us, but that's taken time. So we're just about at the data analysis, and it's been a really exciting thing. And we were just named an AFU, an H Valley University. And so this will be just excellent data for us to bring forward for those initiatives. So I'm so delighted that this scale exists, and you've just been incredibly generous and helpful with your time and explaining to us. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have two more questions. The first is asking about any particular do's or don'ts that we should keep in mind. And Susan, I think you went through the real nuts and bolts, so maybe that one should go to you first.
Very good. Oh, that's a great question. Well, I guess I should talk about the don'ts, because the do's are just do what we said, but the don'ts are, the devil's in some of those details. So it is often the case that a campus won't have exactly the same practice. A question might not work for you, or you might want to add a question on the inventory, or you might want to tinker with something. It's fine to do that within the confines of the scales. It's just anytime you make a change, as you're reading the syntax, but even a change in the Qualtrics the numbering will roll off differently when it gets downloaded. So just keep a record of what you're doing. And I think that's the do is I'm not saying don't adapt it, because we want it to be a kind of living, breathing instrument that's usable. But when you do adapt it, that would then be just okay, I changed this number, and it might seem trivial, but it could mess things up. And luckily with SPSS is unforgiving about some things, but also very kind in other ways. Things will look red as you're writing if you left something out, or you even have an apostrophe wrong. So you'll know when you've done something that is making it unhappy with you. Other than that, I mean, the only other thing we toyed with and we didn't do was having an attention check in the questionnaire, like, do you breathe oxygen? People said, no to that. I don't know. There are all kinds of little tricks like that you can throw in, but we didn't want to do that. We don't want to annoy people by asking them questions like that. We do want to take them at face value. So, but that's something to think about, but we probably wouldn't recommend it.
And I think you mentioned not to forget to save your files and rename them, right? I think I heard that a few times.
A few times, yeah.
Joanne, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I would add just a small thing, but it can have a bit of an impact, which is when you send out the campus climate survey to your campus, give people a big enough window, but not too big, give them a due date, and be sure that you give them some reminders. We encourage people to give them, not to just have it be a one-shot deal, because people will put it aside. They're going to take care of it next week, then they forget about it. But it does help to have a due date and a couple of reminders in order to increase your response.
And Nina, I want to give my last question to you. And then I wanted to ask also if you guys, we have about 4 minutes left. And if you wanted to maybe have Alok pull up the redesigned website and just show people where everything is. Okay,
that's a great idea.
Alec, we'll get ready for that. Nina, while you ask this last question is, do you need funding to get all this started?
I would say that that we started, and I've always called this my Tom Sawyer approach, and that's how Susan just happened to be walking by my office, and I pulled her in, and I said, I want to do this. Joanne at that time was president of the Massachusetts Gerontological Society. I gave a presentation in December, and she immediately resonated with her. Lauren, as I said, we found because I talked to a colleague on the shuttle, the campus shuttle, and so no, we didn't have. As I said, we started off with independent study with one graduate student. We then had some internal funding, and the internal funding I was able to get is because it was interdisciplinary. And so again, pulling in Lauren, we were able to get internal funding. And then we were interesting enough that the RRF Foundation on Aging took a chance on us. And they have funded us for 2 research projects. And now this third, what's supporting us now is a dissemination grant. So yeah, I mean, certainly funding helps, but just getting people together who recognize that this is an important way to spend your time is good. So I don't know if my colleagues want to say anything else.
Great student
I'm happy I walked
project.
down that hallway, Nina.
And
It's a
I
great
want to tell you that I was fibbing. There are 2 other questions that just came in.
Okay.
The first is, can we use the ICCS to obtain AFU status?
Is Aaron on the I think I saw Aaron's name before. There he is. Aaron, you want to answer that?
Oh, there you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, as you apply for AFU status, there are requirements that you demonstrate that you either have planning for, or you will be implementing, at least two of the principles, and then really focusing on one for, your quality improvement for the renewal period. So yes, absolutely. This can be used to obtain status. In fact, I think it's there are multiple ways to kind of develop your age-friendly championship and your demonstrations of evidence, and this definitely is one of them. So yeah, you can definitely use it for those purposes.
Okay, and then the final question, in terms of gathering campus stats, do you recommend an age range for making the case, e.g. currently 50 plus or 40 plus?
Lauren, you take that one. As we discovered from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Yeah, so we were trying to be nuanced with this when we talk about you know, the age categories, that for faculty and staff we sort of stuck with what the, you know, how labor statistics sort of divide up age groups, but for students we wanted to make sure we were sensitive to thinking about the sort of 25 plus range, because for many students in their 30s they feel sort of socially older than the 18 to 24 age range. So we sort of recommend taking that kind of multidimensional approach to defining these age groups.
Okay, I would encourage everyone to stay on an extra minute, just because
Yep.
this website is really incredible.
Yep, Alex, ready to go with that? And so we'll just talk you through, again, the way you get to this webpage is geron.org/AIHE. And as Alex scrolls down, you'll see that there's some resources. The first is the AIDHE infographic is available right there. And then that's right below that is the ICCS. And I'll go ahead and click on that. And you'll see there that all of there's going to be the webinar, there's the copy information or the contact information, and then there's a supporting materials and resources document that you will receive in an email. And then all of these files are available. Again, we won't read you the names of them, but just show you that they're all there, able to be downloaded. And then let's go back to the main page. And just quickly, as I scroll down, the toolkit is there that our wonderful age inclusivity in higher education work group put together. And all of the newsletter issues are there. There's information about the interest group. And then Joanne mentioned that What's Hot publication, and that's right there. You can go ahead and click on that, and that publication is available for you where Alok is highlighting. And then the earlier AFU webinar series is there as well. So with that, I think we have come to 1 minute over our time. I want to thank our wonderful presenters, Nina, and all the panelists. It's been a pleasure to get to this point. And now we'll be spending, again, we'd appreciate if you would take a moment and fill out the brief evaluation that you'll receive as this program concludes. And this does end our first of 2 in this webinar series, and we sure hope you'll join us in September as well. And just a shout out, remember late breaking GSA abstracts, a great time to publish your findings from the ICCS. So go ahead and get those abstracts in when they come out in August. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you all for a great program.
Thank you. Bye.